Doom, doom, doom. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fell. Building more bombs and guns, yet the babies are dying from hunger. We are the victims of your oppression. Blood of the innocent that you slaughtered is upon your hands. You gave the guns, you set the fight, and you sit aside and watch the slaughter of the land you do. Doom, doom, doom. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fail. Babylon, you do. Your writings up on the wall now. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fell. Fire burn down low.
All right, folks, it's a pleasure to be in your company this afternoon. It's the 19th day, Sunday, the 19th day of February 2023. And that is your usual spot each and every Sunday from the 6 o'clock hour. That is where Civic Vibes, that social media program, is on with you each and every Sunday around that time. So yes, again, I want to say a pleasure and welcome to all of you already logged to the spot that you got. We are streaming live on Facebook and also on YouTube as well. So those of you who want to follow on with us here, you have at least 2 avenues that you can follow the program right here this afternoon, and also the future programs as well. It's always a pleasure in your company. But let me touch some persons who are there already. Here we first in terms of their availability. We have Ivenia Joseph, you're there. Good evening to you. Julie Polidor, you are there as well, saying Sunday blessings to myself. And so, yes, in return, Julie, I want to say Sunday greetings to you as well. Mali Austria, you're there. Good evening to you. Pat Corbett, good evening. Adelaide Joseph, you are there as well. Good evening and welcome. Norma Ito, you are there. Stephanie John Baptist, you are there as well. Challenger, that's Miss Challenger, you are there. Maury Jules, Cyrus Raphael. Brian Francis, Maury Jules, yes, I called you already, and those of you who will be tuning in just a bit. So what we ask of you now is that you share the live feed that you are viewing and listening to right about now as we're about to kick off things here in just a bit. It's already 5 minutes past the good old hour of 6 o'clock. This evening, we have a very, very interesting program lined up for you guys this evening. And so, yes, we indulge your participation as well. We know that we are smack into the carnival celebrations in Dominica. And so we wanted to keep it into that same spirit, that same vein. And so we have a cultural icon on the first segment of the program. That is none other than Mr. Gregory Rabes. He will be speaking to us for the first segment of this program on a very, very interesting topic, talking about the sensei costume and the origin thereof. I know lots of folks in Dominica have been seeing these costumes around for some time. Some of us haven't been wearing this costume, and we really don't know or don't have an iota of idea where the costume, the sensei costume that we use as part of our celebrations for the carnival came from, and just how it is meant to uplift the carnival celebrations in Dominica. So Brother Gregory Rabes will be kicking off things here this evening with us and basically giving us much more insight as to all about the sensei costume around the carnival celebrations. In the second segment, we'll have another erudite brother in the name of Mr. Atherton Mate. He will be with us in the second segment. He'll be joining us, that is, where he will be speaking on, still in the vein of carnival celebrations, but on an event, on a tragic situation that happened about 60-something years ago. It is dubbed the Carnival Fire. I know most of us were not around then, but that is a fact that that situation happened. And we will be talking to Atherton Mate, who I'm being told very factually that is one of his brothers, that is Mr. Mate, I think Mr. Edward Mate. He basically died along with two others in that tragic accident, that carnival fire. Many more persons got injured as well during that fire. And so Mr. Martin, he will be speaking to that situation in the second segment of the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, without further ado, let me move across now to our very special invited guest, that is Mr. Rabes, and say a special greetings and welcome to him. Brother Rabes, good evening to you, my brother.
Good evening, bonsoir. Bon après-midi, bonsoir. Bonjour, peut-être les monde New Zealand qui a écouté, puis du bonjour New Zealand là. Ouais, so good evening and good day and good everything. My God, souhaiter tout le monde, I'm wishing everybody a very enjoyable. Well, we call it Samedi Gua. Today's Dimanche Gua. That's yesterday was actually Samedi Gua. That was Fat Saturday. And today is actually Fat Sunday, Dimanche Gua. And tomorrow and Tuesday would be, well, we call it Lady Mass in Dominica and Madi Mass. And then we have Ash Wednesday, which is Mekwedi the Sun. It is also known as Lady Gua, that's tomorrow, and Mardi Gras Tuesday. Of course, everybody is very familiar with the Mardi Gras Carnival in New Orleans. It's probably one of the more famous carnival events on the Carnival Tuesday, the Mardi Gras, the famous Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So that's all part of the Creole, African, European, indigenous Kalinago mix of things. But I guess tonight the focus now is one of our African retentions, a very strong African retention, and it's all about the senses. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And so, Brother Rabes, I want to thank you for taking time off your Sunday afternoon, my brother. I know you could be somewhere else doing something else.
I
know.
Nice.
But you chose to come and share that Sunday afternoon.
I mean, once it's about the culture and sharing the information, I mean, that is part of my life story, really, to do the research and to share the information in many different ways, you know. I mean, like on your program or on videos, on the radio, in books, in my music, in my poetry. I just find different platforms and formats and ways to really share the information and pass on the knowledge. And so it's always a pleasure to do that. And of course, that is the most important thing I think I should be doing on a Sunday afternoon, especially the Dimanche Gua.
True.
And it's just about an hour or two anyway. Yeah.
All right, folks, just before we step into gear, that is, and talking in earnest to Mr. Gregory Rabes, let me give you guys the numbers that you can call. The numbers to call into the program, they are 615-9470. Again, let me repeat that digit number. It is 615-9470. And the flow number, the flow line, it is 245-2396. These numbers will get your voice into the conversation that we are about to have here in just a bit. Brother Rabes, the sensei, where do you want to start in terms of that all interesting topic of the origin of the sensei costume?
Well, the story has to go back to Africa. I mean, we might say there are two sets of, well, it's like we have the African context and then we have the Caribbean or Dominican context of that story. I mean, people are generally Dominican, people are familiar with the sensei costumes, the different types of costumes. Go back almost 150 years or more into the world, you know, the Dominican since emancipation, that is. And then, but there is another part of the story that takes us back to Africa, which not many people are familiar. I mean, people in a very general way, they know that the sensei tradition and the costume, the tradition is of African origin, but there are elements of the African story that are not widely known here in Dominica. So let's go back to Africa if you don't mind, and then we'll take it to Dominica.
Sure, no problem.
That's okay?
Yes.
All right. Sure. Now, the word sensei actually is an African term. It's from I think it's from one of the Ghanaian groups, population groups, the Twi people of Ghana. And sensei actually means ruffled. You see, like the stuff at the back there, it's like ship cloth and stuff. Now there's a fowl called a sensei fowl in Jamaica. They refer to it as the sensei fowl. I think we refer to it as the pujega in Dominica, but it's a grayish, very ruffled kind of feathers kind of thing. In fact, they believe, I mean, in Jamaica, maybe in Haiti as well, but in Jamaica, that particular fowl has powers. It has something to do with the mystics and the spirituality. So that word sensei means ruffled, and it's a Ghanaian or Twi word meaning ruffled.
Okay.
Now that tradition was brought to Dominica by enslaved Africans. The famous boat, or the boats, the boat trips. But before we dive into the Dominica setting, the sensei tradition, you will find it especially in what you call sub-Saharan Africa. So those of you who want to consult your maps of Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa would be basically the central corridor, horizontal corridor, stretching from Senegal in the west of West Africa, going all the way to Mozambique in the east. So in that whole what you call the really tropical forest zone of Africa, this would be the heartland of the sensei tradition. Today is very, very, I mean, countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, this would be like the epicenter countries, you might say, of that tradition in Africa. And you will recall too that in terms of the slave trade, many of the greater majority of the population that were enslaved came from Western Africa. Although in terms of the story of the slave trade, there was a lot of journey into the hinterlands of Africa to basically kidnap other Africans and bring them to the coast of Angola and Ghana itself, Senegal, and then transship those folks across the waters to the Caribbean, including Dominica. And Dominica was a major transshipment point because we have the Barracoon building right now, still existing on the bayfront. And that was a major, it was like a storage center for the newly arrived Africans. And as the exile one says, you aggress him or expose him wherever you go. There is still a platform at the Barracoon building where they expose the Africans, shine them up, and then the planters would stay on the porch. This is all the porches that you see on the stadium, not the stadium, sorry, the Barracoon building. That's where the white planters used to stay and bid for the Africans. So it's all there in the Barracoon building, that kind of heritage. Now, that's a very important thing.
That's a very rich part of our history right there.
Yes, indeed. Now, the thing is, one of the most critical things about the sensei tradition, is the mask. The mask. The mask is even more fundamental than the actual, the rest of the costumes. In Africa, it's all about the mask and the rest of the materials that they use, like leaves and plants and straw and sisal and other kinds of materials. That's what's to cover the rest of the body, because the tradition of nobody needs to know or supposed to know who is under that mask, quote unquote. And then the masks in Africa take many shapes and forms, and the horns and all of that. And all of these have meanings. In Dominica, over time, we have lost the meanings of those masks. So it's more about, and it became associated with carnival. But a lot of the masks were of animal heads and human faces into the basic shape. And they use materials like, wood, cowhide, the cowhide fashion, cowhide, grass, leaves, the bark of trees, of course, the animal horns, and they use metal as well, light metal like copper or bronze. Now, the masks were also decorated and painted, and all kinds of things were added. Now, the horns in Dominica over time, and with the advent of Christianity, they designated all the culture of Black people in Africa and indigenous Kalinago, the Kalinago people, as pagan, as Satan, and devil business. So you have that sort of stereotyping of our carnival down from going way back. That's a bagay diab. So now the Europeans, they draw a level. Their construction of them was a black man with horns and a tail and that kind of thing. In fact, you even have a painting of Michael Archangel, a white fella with a big pitchfork, digging a black fella on the ground, and that black fella is supposed to be and Oliver LeBlanc, who is the father of the nation, Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Actually, he commissioned an artist to rewrite that script. And he has, I'm not sure where the Inoxologist might have informed us of the family where that picture is, and we know where hurricanes pass and all that. But he had the Michelangelo as a black fella, and the devil now was a white fella. So he flipped the script. But I'm saying that to say that the Europeans declared all our traditions, including the Sense and the mass tradition in Africa and the Caribbean, as bagay diab. Okay, so that already putting a big stone on go wash on Shimmer. That made them go wash on Shimmer for people who otherwise who are very devoutly Christian, Catholic or otherwise, and want to take part in the carnival activities. So that kind of stereotyping, otherwise I have this song, they make a mess up your head. They make a mess up your head. If you eat out with cacao bass and you think you have a sevel. So that kind of thing. It's a brainwashing process. Now these horns, they represented the different animals like the buffalo in Africa and the antelope, right? Now the buffalo horns, the buffalo itself symbolizes strength, force, power. The antelope now, the horns and the animal itself, it signifies agriculture vibes, an abundant harvest, for example. Okay, so in different parts, like in Cote d'Ivoire, the buffalo represents strength. In places like in Mali, the antelope reflects agriculture and another abundant harvest. And of course, the master one on the face or is just totally covering the head. All right, and so the bodysuit is what we are talking about into the rest of the outfit. Now, the masks represent, as I said, different meanings. The animals, the virtues, and for example, the masks and the horns that they use, they represent agriculture and a harvest, or good harvest. Sometimes the mask represents an homage to a dead, some ancestor, maybe a powerful tribe, a chief who died. And the mask also portrays feminine beauty, the beauty of the African woman. So the masks represent that. And of course, as I said, to honor famous or legendary, iconic persons in this. It also has to do with fertility and reproductive rights, not like dua, but rights, R-I-T-E-S, right?
Yes.
It's rituals, in other words, yeah? Because in Africa, when the girls come at puberty, you have, at birth, you have certain types of tradition. At puberty, you have another type of tradition. And then you have all these marital and reproductive fertility rights that go on in Africa. And now there's a very important meaning and context associated with the sense in Africa. Is to protect the community against evil forces. Now that's crucial, because I said just a while ago that the Europeans said, well, that is the devil worship, and that is satanic and pagan and whatever it is. But here it is, the Africans themselves consider the sense tradition, the sense figure, as something to protect the community against evil spirits, the complete opposite. So you can well understand what happened in Africa and what happened to our culture when Europeans entered our space and just really turn things around in their quest to break us down, because they already had trained us physically. They had to do a job now on training us
mentally,
the
wow.
mind, training the mind. And all of this part of the story of the enslavement of the mind. Great. So you have these masks and you have the outfits made of the different types of materials. Now, the rituals of the sense and so that was including drumming. So that is where the Lapo carpet comes in. So in Africa, there was a lot of drumming, there's a lot of dancing, and they dance in certain ways. Now that when you put on your mask and you start to engage with the drumming and the dancing, it gives you a sort of a natural high because body those hormones, and you have adrenaline and all that kicking in, right? So
yes.
Natural high. So it sort of transforms you into, we might say, the spiritual realm. It just, that kind of thing. So, and then as part of the ritual, when the persons in the mask get going and so on, they do certain things as well. And there are two things that they do which we find in Dominican sensory traditions still today. One was they usually made under the mask a lot of sort of grunt noises, like like a mama goes up, the different types of grunts. And the other thing, or say maybe unintelligible things, or maybe intelligible things, but in a deep voice that really just that is one thing with the voice. Another thing that they used to do is the use of the feet, because they used to have these shoes, and it's like clackers, man. And they used to make this sound. They used to attach, like shakers and other things to the feet. And feet. So it gives that sort of percussive song. So they stomp as well. So in the dance, the Spanish thing, they stomp their feet a lot. Right. So now in Dominica, that stomping and that grunts existed back in the last century, especially in places like Newtown, when the sensory revelers journey from Newtown and head into Roseau, and they used to stamp their feet. There's these shoes, so you just make that noise, man. And
yes.
apart from it, occupied by you, that is just band sensei coming down the road. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So that part of element of this tradition going couple hundred years going back in Africa, still is reflected in more sensei tradition in more modern times. Let me just scroll on my thing here. So the sensei tradition in Africa has to do with the spiritual and the cultural context, the rites of passage, they call that, birth, puberty, marriage, and so on, death. And it has to do also with protecting the community toward evil spirits. And there's a lot of sort of revelry associated with that tradition, dancing and music, drumming, and all that now found its way into Dominica. And of course, since we had lost the spiritual meanings of the sensei traditions along the way over time, it meant that the only logical period that we could really bring the sensei back to life would have to do with the carnival, because the carnival is all about the revelry, the drum, the music, and da-da-da. So that is why sensei in Dominica and the Caribbean, I guess, it's not guess, I shouldn't say that, but Dominica and the Caribbean, the sensei tradition became so closely associated with carnival. So that is the sort of story now, what was happening in Africa. So the horns and the masks, they have meanings, and the rest of the costumes and all of that is to disguise the person. Now, if we fast forward into Africa, to Dominica, in the period of slavery, now we could not practice the sensei tradition.
Roberts, one question before we come to
move into Dominica. Yeah.
Someone is making a statement here, but I just want to put it in the question form. That chant and that dance that you spoke of, did the Africans, did they use that as part of their religion as well?
Yes, well, it was, I wouldn't say about the religion thing, but it's a ritual.
Yeah,
I mean, it's because Africa, there are many religious beliefs and practices, right? And in the religious beliefs and practices, of course, there is always the music, the drumming, the singing.
Yes.
Now, these things in African tradition, music, drumming, dancing were inseparable. It's part of the whole community collective vibe. Is in sort of modern Western music has tended to separate the elements. But in traditional Dominican too, ceremony, when you have a Lawan Bele in Granby back in the days, the whole community was the Bele, the group of singers, the Chatoué.
Yeah.
So it's all about the collective thing. Yeah. So in principle, yes, you would have the tradition and the music and all of that, and the costumery and the mask represented as you might say, the tangible aspects of the representation of a religious ritual. But of course, the belief system goes beyond that into beliefs and everyday practice.
Yes. Okay, understood.
So now, should we go into the Dominica thing?
Sure. Come right down the line.
Yes. Okay, now we were talking about the period of slavery in Dominica, mainly during the period of 1700, because remember, the period of slavery in Dominica was only the shortest period of enslavement in the entire Caribbean, because thanks to the Kalinago, who put up a lot of resistance in Dominica, and the Negmao later, that the Dominica was one of the last islands in the Caribbean to be colonized by the Europeans. So the first people of African origin or descent arrived here somewhere, like around the 1600s. Although there are theories that the Africans journeyed to the West, so-called Western world, north and south, long before Columbus. I thought there's another theory that says that Africa and Latin America, the land mass was one and it broke off. So there's a definite link going way back. But in terms of just the modern context, in Sensei we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the majority of the African population arrived here in that period, in terms of that. But since under slavery, that could not be practiced, but the tradition remained in people's heads, like many other African traditions, and it was transferred to the generations. So you find that after emancipation in 1838, 1834-38, that period, you had a lot of celebrations by the newly freed African peoples in Dominica. And then, of course, through the French colonial process, we had the pre-Lenten carnivals, all right? But that was a thing for the European planters in things. So they used to have their Mardi Gras and Samedi Gras business and all of that. So in those days, the French were a little bit more, I don't know if it's subtle or liberal, in their whole relationship with this. So you find that the enslaved Africans had a bit more merriment and celebrity things going that way, as opposed to some of the islands that were colonized by the British. The British tend to be Puritans, that kind of thing, English kind of thing.
Yes,
keep your face serious and all
yes,
that.
yes.
But the French were much more what they call bohemian. They like life, so they like to enjoy life, drink wine and be merry, and so that thing kind of filtered into the thing. So they were a little bit more liberal. So in that sense, the blacks were able to sort of find a little space within that period to pass on the tradition. Now, after the period of emancipation, so and the people are hitting the streets, so you find that the Dominican population now began to practice the sensei, and in doing that, developing the costumes and basically trying to use what they can find in the environment. So what they found in the environment, they found things like vetiver, sisal, and strupine, and banana leaves and things of that nature. So you find the first set of sensei costumes and the images will portray that were widely the sisal, the rope sensei, sisal.
Okay.
They make a thing, and that has a link to the carnival fire, by the way. And then we also had pie fig, because pie fig was readily, dried banana leaves readily available, and that kind of thing. So you find the pie fig sensei. And of course, when cloth became more widely available, then you find we moved to cloth. And then you had another material that was what we call sac mayol. That is the crocus bag. Yeah? So
Yes,
crocus
yes.
bag. Yeah. And then later on, we got the plastics and paper and bottle stoppers and all kind of things. So, but another interesting thing about the evolution of the Sensei tradition in Dominica, you find some of the, what we might call the Sensei centers of in Dominica, like Granby, Roseau, Maho, Portsmouth. I mean, these were what you might call the epicenters of the Sensei tradition. We're not talking about band movie and stuff like Napoleon Lapid. We're talking about Sensei. But you find in Granby now, there's a lot of specialization in the sac mayol, back in the days, crocus bag stuff. In Roseau, I think you could get everything in Roseau. But there's a lot of the rope Sensei, sisal material being used in Roseau. And so the Roseau was a kind of a reflection of that. And one of the things that those guys used to do was to soak the rope material sisal in petrol, gasoline, to give it a sheen, make it shine. And that is the link to the carnival fire. But I guess when Afi comes on, we'll get more into
that is what I was told today.
Yes.
By some persons who actually they helped in making these costumes.
Right. So now, and that is why so it was highly fun, you know, it was, I mean, well, a little match, but that whole thing does go up in smoke. You know, so it was a serious situation there. And because of that, the tragedy that unfolded. So now, continuing the process of the history. So you had in those centers, they were sort of specializing in different costumes. St. Joseph today, they tend to focus on the cloth Sensei. Granby, bit of the sac mayol, the Razi crocus bag, and cloth material as well. And spread throughout, you got the pie fig. Now, the pie fig was affected by the black sigatoka disease, and you could not, and there was a ban on moving banana leaves from one part of the country to the other to avoid the spread of that disease that was affecting bananas. So that affected, in a sense, the pie fig Sensei tradition. So over time, Sensei became closely associated with carnival. We lost all the spiritual meanings, and we lost the meanings of the masks and the horns. Another important development that affected the Sensei tradition, but in particular the mask tradition, was the passing of the Obia laws in Dominica. Probably, I don't know, Google there. I think it's 1905 or somewhere around there. You know, in that first decade of the last century, somewhere in between there was the Obia laws that was passed in Dominica, and that basically outlawed anything. Yeah, it outlawed any practice of so-called African religion. Well, Obia, you know, because as I said, the whole thing was that they stereotype any manifestation of African religion as devil and whatever, and so and also Obia was part of that. So they passed a law to ban Obia, not only in Dominica but Jamaica and throughout the colonies, and so that affected. So people who could make masks and carvers, that affected because they couldn't make it, was banned. They couldn't do that because the law also said it put a ban on all the objects associated with the practice of Obia. So the masks and the wooden implements and so all that was banned. So that created a very important negative effect in Dominica in terms of the continued development of the carving, the wood carving and sculpting, and especially the mask tradition in Dominica. Even the governor, I think at the time, the white fellow, English governor, the man had just come out of Africa. The man was working in Africa and they transferred him to Dominica. Can you imagine that? All the man office was decorated in a whole set of African mask. Why had he take down his mask and put that in a cupboard and hide that? You know, this is the governor of the country, kind of vibe. So it was actually very silly. So that Obia law they passed in Dominica in the early part of the last century also affected that. And then so right now the Sensei now was really associated with carnival. So all the revelers prepared in the months leading up to carnival, did the costumes, put on their mask, and you don't know who is under the costume, eh? And that is the other thing about the mask on carnival. Yeah. It allows the revelers to free up because you can have a bourgeois under the mask, you know.
True.
you know, you just don't know who on the mask. So the mask now is getting bad, got some Malay kind of vibe. You know, you get on one of the mask, see? Because nobody don't know. And the other thing that people have to understand too is that back in the days, the mask was big people thing. You know, little children used to hide under their mother bed, you know. When you see the band mask reach your home boy, you're running under your mother bed as a little boy. I say, you afraid that? You afraid them, sensei? So you find now that the traditional masquerade, that's why we call it mask. You got jouer mask, you got kubi mask. That was big people thing, that's all. So that is why, in fact, I think I'm considering doing a little piece on that. I have done pieces on that, on the Shanti mask tradition. So there was a very strong Malay element to the Shanti mask tradition going way back. You see, so that story goes way back to the Shanti mask tradition. But because it was big people thing, little children hiding under their mother bed, they could get away with that thing, you know, and make song on people and so on. So anyway, so you have the guys from Newtown, the guys in Roseau, you know, Maho, St. Joe, Portsmouth, Granby, you know, doing the traditions on the road, in the street. Sometimes they would go up and down the road and clash, but still maintaining that's where the Lapo came in to drive the beat and the stomping and the grunting and that kind of thing. So Dominica eventually became, in my view, one of the strongest centers of the sensei tradition in the entire Caribbean. Because earlier I said that the sensei tradition spread throughout the Caribbean from Africa. And if you look at images of carnivals from Bahamas through Cuba, all the way down to Trinidad, going down Suriname, Venezuela, you know, the Central America, you will see manifestations of the sensei tradition, the sensei outfit, the costumery of sensei. So it's there. It's just that in Dominica, sensei became an institution. Very powerful institution. Back in the days in the 1950s, 60s, to 40s, carnival in Dominica was just about sensei. Hardly anything else. The whole carnival thing was as a sensei. Mass. You know, the steel band started coming in after the Second World War. And then the, you know, electronics and all that much later than that. But carnival back in the days in the first half of the last century, between 1900 and 1950, was dominated by Lapo Kabit and Sensei. And of course, we might put a band movie and all that traditional mass in between. But Sensei was the big dominant cultural practice in Dominica's Carnival. Now, so up until the 60s, when we had the fire, now I will talk about that.
Yes.
But long and short, when the fire took place, the government, as a knee-jerk reaction, decided to ban masks and sensei. Because another thing about the mask, well, let's put on the mask and why they have a revenge, some, you know, kind of thing, and they're taking their revenge. They have a score to settle, so they hide under the mask and do their thing, which, you know, bring our carnival thing into disrepute and bring the sensei into disrepute. So there was a security concern, plus there was a safety concern at the time. So the government decided to ban the thing, ban the mask, and ban sensei. That goes with it. And that ban lasted till the early 90s. 1990. I wrote an article on that, seeking to unban the sensei. Actually, today represents, I think, the 31 years, I believe it was in 2023 years. About 30 years ago, I wrote an article calling for the unbanning of the sensei. And I'm pleased to share with you that, in fact, practically all the recommendations that I made and were actually taken on board. And I also have to credit Donnie Robinson, the late Donnie Robinson, because I penned the article. It was published in the Chronicle, but it was out of a very informal discussion on the steps of ministry, because he was concerned about the future of the sensei. I was concerned about it, and we met on the steps of the ministry, and then we shared some thoughts about the safety, the fire hazard concerns, the vengeance, you know, the violent part of it as well. And then I basically put everything together and calling for the unbanning of the sensei. So the modern the use of the sensei in Dominica now takes its root in that period. And what you have happening now, so since the unbanning of the sensei, what you have having is a further evolution now of the costumes of sensei. I mean, using more materials, right? You know, like plastics, paper.
Yes.
Because more materials, you know, what do you call those things? Synthetic materials became available to us. And cloth too, because you have more tailors working all year round. The whole Creole vibe brought a huge increase in work for the tailors in Dominica. So there are a lot of little bits of cloth available. So that's why we're organic sample muscle 12. Anyway, give you a sense. Yeah. So another thing about the sense, you know, is like it putting waste material into productive use.
True.
You know, when waste is not wasted. So that is another plus for the sensei. You can, you know, a lot of materials in the environment, discarded materials, you know, the banana leaves, you cut on the banana thing, you got to put the thing to dry. You have stuff, you go, you get the rope material, you check your sin, and you know, so you can use that. But you can also use synthetic materials. For example, one of the synthetic materials that's commonly used now. Okay, I have this here. Now, this is what they call tinsel material. You see that you get that, you know, people in the Halloween business and so on. Okay. Now this is a Viking hat I bought in London for about £1 kind of thing, you know. Viking hat. But you see, there's a helmet and the horns, and then you know you can do your little thing, and you know you a fast track. You have a fast what you call that, a fast track sensei headpiece. Using, you know, modern materials, because it's the same concept of the horns and the helmet and thing, and you do your thing and you throw some tinsel material on that, and you have your rest of your outfit and you're good to go. So that's another issue, because the sensei costumes are bulky, you know, heavy, man, everything heavy, and that was the only problem in the fire too, because you know, like man,
try to take that out.
And it's problem.
True.
So as part of the evolutionary process of sensei costumes, we have to find ways to make the sensei costumes easier to make, you know, because I mean, you have to sew the things. So one of the things I think we should do is to develop ready-made sensei materials. By that, I mean, I should be able to go in any store, well, a store in Dominica, the main ones, and buy already made stripped cloth, you know, stripped. So you can just buy strips, and some of them you can even go high tech and put what do you call those things that stick together on cloth? Velcro.
The Velcro material. Yes, Velcro.
Oh, you put Velcro on the end of that, and then you know you have, let's say you buy 10 strips. You put Velcro on there, you have your Velcro on there. So in 5 minutes you have a sensei outfit on your normal pants and t-shirt. You transform your pants and t-shirt into sensei or using. So that is the way we have to go. We have to evolve it, and that is the way now we can get younger people involved in the sensei tradition too. Because you know how the song going, they want it now, you know, now for now, the internet generation, right? So, so we have to evolve the thing so that and everybody in their fast food business and who on the fast lane and digital food, so we're on the fast lane. So we have to evolve the sensei tradition to fit in that sort of fast-paced life that we have, but also to make it easier for people to put themselves in a sensei costume. So these are some of the things that we can do, you know, and but we also need to move away from the Halloween mask kind of thing and make our own mask. And we can make masks because we used to make the mask in Dominica with wire mesh, or you can do papier mâché and you think whole newspaper. A good skin, calabash, and you have your mask.
True.
Yeah.
All right, Brother Rabes, thanks for the information thus far. Let's take a little break at this time. We're going to come back to you in just a bit. All right, let's take a little break.
Nice one.
Let's take a little break. Let's do this. Yes, Dominicans, we're having a very, very interesting conversation here with the brother Gregory Rabes, a cultural icon in Dominica.
This is the old mass of Sensei Festival.
talking to us about the origin of the sensei costume that we always celebrate with during our carnival celebrations. So we're just giving you some of the old Lapo Kabwit music at this time before we get back to our special guest here. All right, Brother Robes, as we continue on the conversation here this evening, I'll get to the live feed in just a while to hear what some of the viewers and listeners are saying. Let me ask you, in terms of what you last touched on, the making of the sensei, the making of the mask in Dominica, are these things sort of slowly but surely going out in terms of persons, number one, having the knowledge of doing those things, making those things? And what about persons like you, you know, or and others helping in that process to keep that culture alive by passing on that information?
Yes, we do have some of the practitioners passing on, you know, but there are still important practitioners who are still alive, and some of them are in the various bands and Thunderbirds and so on. So we have to find ways to do that, and one of the most important ways to do that is the schools. We got to go into the schools. We got to have a greater, within the context of the performing arts programs in schools, we got to have more carnival oriented programs as part of that. I know the school agenda, they tend to be a bit seasonal. There's nothing wrong with that. For example, the thing is, for example, in September, the children focus on Creole Day vibes, so the whole emphasis, which is cool. But as soon as November starts, then you have the Christmas thing. But so it's a kind of a bit of a tight squeeze in that sense. But we have to find ways in our visual and performing arts programs to get the children to do more mask making and more costume making. And then, of course, they always have the carnivals, you know, in all the schools, the primary school, they do have a lot of that going on. So that is one way. We have to bring the carnival practitioners, the resource persons, into the schools to teach the young children to make the costumes. I mean, whenever you see a little child, when I see a little child in a sensei costume, and that is my greatest, I mean, that is such a pleasure thing to see a little child, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, doing the thing, you know, really enjoying herself in the sensei, you know, that is really nice. So that is where you have to start. I mean, I always remember one of maybe the first cultural gala in 19-something, 66, somewhere there about, in the Botanic Gardens. I went to that as a little boy, you know, maybe a 10-year-old boy, whatever story. Yeah, but that had an everlasting impact on my life. I can close my eyes and see the thing in the gardens, you know. So never underestimate, never underestimate the impact of participation of children in cultural activities and events. It has a lifelong impact on their personality, basically. And it is well established that music and the culture and the arts help human beings to develop a more well-rounded personality. It makes them better human beings, more responsible citizens, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's just like sports, the same story.
True.
So we talk about
talking about that, just let me add here. Today, we had in Tonga, I had the opportunity to witness the Kiddies celebration, the Kiddies Carnival. And exactly what you said. I did not see much of children in the costume, in the sensei, with the mask. You know, they were enjoying themselves, yes, but not in the traditional stuff.
Right.
That we knew. So hence that education.
But probably we might see some of them on Monday, generally, because it's the old mass day, so you might find a couple children more. Maybe they're saving the best for tomorrow in that state. So it becomes the Monday best. kind of thing. But I take the point. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember Kiddies Carnival. I'm checking all as we speak. There's Kiddies Carnival in Kalinago territory as well going on. I wish them very well up there. But yes, so the innovation is happening at the level of the costumes. So we got to innovate. Now remember, Sensei now is becoming more an all-year-round employment generation activity for the bands, because right now they're getting gigs, to go and play at test cricket in the gardens here. Some of them are invited to carnivals like in, St. Lucia, in Antigua, St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, to come and participate in the carnival. So there is money to be gained in this sense. So it means that we have to evolve the Sensei as a cultural industry. And the point I made about making Sensei costumes easy to put on and to put together is all part of the cultural industry associated with Sensei. There are other things we can do around the Sensei industry. We know a Sensei as industry is to make what they call souvenirs and memorabilia. In Cuba, I expect to get a doll soon. A Sensei doll, basically a Sensei doll. So you have these dolls. And you can sell them long term as the Sensei dolls. So there's money to be made by the craft persons and so on to the tourists who visit, because it represents, it's not bulky, you can take it away. You can put a guy can put it on his desk, his working desk in Manhattan, for example. Yes. And he has visited by the Sensei doll. This is from Dominica. And you have a big old story about that Sensei thing. And we have to promote those things. So we can do memorabilia with the Sensei and stuff. We also have to do some more innovations and work in the rituals of the Senseis. By that I mean the choreography on the streets and the way that they set up the choreograph. If you look at what the band movie do in Coliho, they have a particular choreograph, right? Where it's like single file and they move like kind of a snake kind of movement. Yes. And they go wrong eventually. Now the guys from Grande, also they have a choreography and they do that kind of formation as well, right? And circle and come back again and that kind. So that is what you call choreography. So we got to continue working on that. I think that's very, very, very good on that thing. And we also need to work with the Lapo Cabit bands that usually accompany, because sometimes you have someone in the Lapo Cabit band, if I was in Bowman, that's you know what I'm saying? And they have like, they just go and dig barrels, you have knapsack on your back. They have no, you have to do better than that. That's all. You have to, so the Lapo Cabit bands themselves.
They have to represent.
Chupul. You know what Chupul doing? Chupul is probably a good example in that. Chupul, every time they have a different kind of costume and it's well done. And the bands that come here from Martinique, Tambuba Canal and Mascaclay and the other famous one, the Akio, when the man come Dominica, them fellas, they're playing in formation. In formation, not information, in formation.
Formation, yes.
So they have their lines, they have their position, everybody in your space. Man, not just going Vitivine, not going all that. No, but you have to keep your position. And when you come with your video camera and your cameras and you take your shot, or you get in angles, you get in lines, you get in circles, you get in aesthetics, you get in visuals. But the fellas, the thing, they're all over the place and it's other commerce. No, boy. So we have to work, improve on that. So that's where the Lapo Cabit bands now have to, do like the Brazilian guys and so on, put on their LTCs and their whatever. And if you're in a Sensei band, so what the Lapo Cabit bands do, just put some little strips, because, so they fit in well with the whole Sensei vibes. They cannot really put the full thing, but they have to beat the drum and all that story. But represent, you know what I'm saying? So we have to work on that.
Yeah, we have to pull enough in the conversation in just a bit. It's 2 minutes to 7 o'clock. But just a question before we veer off into the carnival fire aspect of things here. The Lapo Cab with the music itself, Brother Rabbis, can you just touch on that in terms of the hype, the energy that emanates from that kind of a music? Because trust me, I see Dominicans how they react to the Lapo Cab with music. It is a type of music that people just gravitate towards. Can you just speak to that in terms of, our wrapping up on that topic?
Yeah, well, you see, it's part of our DNA.
Yeah.
It's like, it's again, remember the story of the drum coming,
Yes,
you know, and,
yes.
I remember too the Kalinago. There's a drumming tradition in the Kalinago as well, eh? And that is why you find the Kalinago territory is also a very strong carnival center. They don't do much sense. They do the Tet Mass and so on. But it's a very powerful, but we're talking, so I say that to say the Lapu Kabit thing with the drum. That boy that is just, you know, when the drum start to beat the song, it's like you got a little train stamp in your foot, you know.
Yeah.
So it's part of our DNA.
Mm-hmm,
Now, the thing about the music of Lapu Kabit, okay, there are certain specific ways that you play the Lapu Kabit. I mean, you have the tiki drum, the solo drum, and there are ways that because it's a solo, and you have the bass and whatever. So now, you find what the modern bands do, especially in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and you find like the guys from Maho, they're doing that. I think they're one of the best in that now, the Lapu Kabit band. They do what you call stops and starts and breaks and all kind of thing, you know, bram, 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 you know, that kind of thing. So you in the music of the music, the drumming ensemble, you can choreograph that, you know, you can have your parts. For example, in Martinique, you can do that very well. I mean, downtown Roseau, the whole band playing, you know, everybody playing, and then the whole band stop, you know. And the only thing that playing is what they call the T-boy, which is the bamboo. So you hear tack, 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 for about a good 1 minute. That all you hear, tack, 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 tack. And after you hear any drum breaking, the kind of from fire. And when you crank up here, and then big beat on, the famous beat on one. You got to use the beat on for the big. You hear the beat on coming, you know, that kind of thing. So the whole, so it's choreographing, not just the dancing and the spinning around, but the music, man. The Lapu Kabit is not just beating the drum, no. It has its own internal logic and arrangement. So Lapu Kabit bands, for the message for them now is to continue to innovate along those directions. Yeah, man, nice.
Brother Rabes, I want to thank you. It's 7 o'clock. I want to thank you very much for speaking much more about the origin of the sensei. You went all the way back in Africa, brought us to Dominica, and as though just tied up the conversation nicely here this evening. I want to say on behalf of the many folks viewing, listening, watching there at this time, thank you very, very much, brother, for your invaluable contribution this afternoon.
It's always a pleasure. And I also would like to remind people to go on Google, go on the internet. And, you know, there are lots of that. I will direct them to the Festival of Masks in Africa.
Yeah.
I think it's called Festima. And in that festival, which groups, like I said, Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, and those places there. That is where you see Sensei. When you look at how the man rolling the Sensei in that Festival of Masks in Africa, you say, but that is Dominica. It's the same thing. Am I tumbling? And why is the same thing? So I would encourage the listeners to go on the web and do the research, look at Festima, and look at other things that are happening, you know, the tradition of Sensei, generally speaking, in Caribbean, Jonkunu, and everything in Jamaica, and so on, so on, so on. Yes, right.
All right, my brother. Thank you very much. You're not obliged to stay on, but you know, if you want, you can stick around. You know,
no, I don't mind sticking around. I mean, I might, how do you call that? Interact with Afi. That's okay.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. All right, I'm seeing Athi is here. Athi, are you hearing me?
I think he's muted.
Yes.
You heard you? What are you doing, Athi? I'm trying to get on. He said he see you on. Yeah, because he.
Okay, Athi, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good evening.
Hi, my brother. How is it?
Reasonable. Considering everything.
All right. Good. Okay. Yes, yes, we are here, Athi. You have been following the discussion, I guess. Gregory Rabes is still here. And so we have just veered into the conversation that we would really like you to dive a bit deeper into this evening. I know it is not the best of topics, the best of conversations that we're about to have, but, you know, we must have it nonetheless. You know, a lot of Dominicans really don't have a clue what happened. A lot of Dominicans are still pained by that very tragic carnival fire, that 1963 fire. And so hence you are here for us this evening. Once again, good evening, bro.
Good evening, and thank you, Lofty, and thank you, Gregory, for sharing his wide knowledge on some elements of the artist. I think it's very important. And I hope that that kind of work gets a little. As far as the situation 60 years ago is concerned, I would let me begin by extracting what I believe are some of the lessons that we have not learned. Some of them were touched on by Gregory in terms of actually what is culture? What is our culture? We've been very much in denial about that. There are certain classes of people in our history and even today.
I think just before you move along, we are not seeing you. Your video is off. Is that intentional? You want it to stay so? We are hearing you loud and clear, but do you want to switch on your video or you want to leave it as this?
I don't know. I had it on and I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I don't mind being seen, okay. But I cannot, because of my vision is a little bit difficult.
I understand that. I understand that. Yeah.
So I can't.
Okay. There's an icon there, the camera icon that is supposed to be clicked, and then you will be seeing you. But if you cannot do that now, then we're hearing you loud and clear. You just what you're playing with is the mute and unmute the mic. The next one should be the camera. That is what needs to be turned on.
Okay.
Just across from that mic button.
Let's see. Wait. Well, I have my wife is here giving me the benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, it fades just across. It's just across the mute button.
But we are not seeing. So, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, it was just coming on a while ago. It went back off.
Why don't we just proceed? I mean, let people imagine what I look like.
Well, we have a photo of your handsome face there, But
okay, let's work with that. Let's not.
All right, no problem. Go right on. Yes.
Technology to interfere with good work. First of all, let me thank you, Lofty, and all involved with you in doing the work that you continue to do. There's no substitute for what you're doing in sharing emotion and information and insight. The word emotion was not a Freudian slip. It probably kind of reminds us that culture is also about emotion and feeling. But like I said, I would prefer at this time, 60 years later, to explore some of the things that I believe the lessons we have not, drawn from that experience, because it continues to impact the way we as a people behave, not just on matters of culture, but on matters of economics and matters of governance and everything. Societies and human beings, and as a species, we learn if we pay attention to what we do that works and what we do that does not work. Did we get the desired result, or did we get an unexpected result, and why? That curiosity of mind and that hunger for learning, that determination to find answers to our questions, so that when our children and the little ones ask us, "But why not, Daddy?" and you tell them, "No, son, don't do that." You say, "But why, Daddy?" That is the naturalness of curiosity. Unfortunately, we manage to stifle that curiosity as we grow older, and we seem more intent on learning how to behave according to what the society seems to be suggesting than how to behave according to our naturalness. And I believe one of the issues that always touches me about this time of year and the anniversary of the event is that notwithstanding the fact that this is an event that occurred in broad daylight in the heart of a city where there were thousands of people on the streets, where there were cameras, where there was an eventual death of 3 young men, and where there was an investigation and a commission of inquiry, which drew certain conclusions. Notwithstanding all of these bits and pieces, we have managed as a society to really try very hard to push this out of our way. And Gregory mentioned the ban on the sensei. That was a knee-jerk reaction, which didn't really get at all at the core of the issue that was confronting us, or that we were confronted with by the fire on February 25th, 1963. It was a kind of a way of, appeasing our conscience, as opposed to doing what maturing societies would do, is to say, but why did this happen? How was this possible? How dare we not investigate this to the fullest so that we draw the lessons from it that, one, prevent future incidents like it, and two, actually inform the way that we do our cultural activities, inform the way, as Gregory again was suggesting, how do we transform what appears to be just a CWO activity, but is not, into an industry, into something that challenges our young people, our elders, challenges our technicians, challenges the organizers of these events to sort of get with the program, get modern enough. Modern in the sense, not just converting from the use of one material to another, but modern in the way you organize things, in the kind of planning that you do. How much planning do we do for Carnival as a whole, as a festival, compared with the other societies like Brazil, that on Ash Wednesday, they start planning for next year. Trinidad used to be that way as well, and so on and so on. So how do we make these things an integral part of our culture, of our society, so that it's not just an add-on? And then on Ash Wednesday, we put the costumes away, we put the lapo cabwit away, we put the steel pans away, we put the artists away until the next festival, which actually manages to stunt the growth of the form, the art form. Because instead of growing for 12 months of a year, the art is kind of crowded into a little box of time, which doesn't allow it time to do the things that, again, Gregory was suggesting, to be innovative about costume making, about costume materials, about restoring the critical art form to the dancing and the presentation of the costume in a way that really captivates. And I would just, as a footnote, suggest the same is true of other costumes, traditional costumes, like the Suswell Sui, what we would call the bat costume, etc., 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 which was an integral part of our celebration, but somehow got weeded out over the years. And so I really think that for me is the beginning of a continuing journey of what does this incident tell us about ourselves? Mm-hmm. Did we become a better society, a better people, a more mature people, a more organized people, a more productive people, a more pleasant people, hospitable people, etc.? Did we do all those things? Or did we just kind of so hurriedly push the incident aside that we failed to extract the lessons from the accident or from the event?
Yeah. Afi, thank you very much for sort of, painting that picture as to how you think that the industry, that whole cultural industry is supposed to be up and running, even after a very tragic situation like that. As I said, we still have Mr. Rabes here first. So Rabes, you can chime in. Please feel free to chime in on, any point that you think worth elaborating on. But Afi, a lot of persons are there expecting a man like you 3 young men, you said earlier, died on that day, 1963, that carnival celebrations. A number of other persons got injured. They got scorched by whatever was in the air, whatever happened on that day. I had the opportunity today to read through cover to cover that inquiry that was that had gone into that tragic situation. And to me, Artie, when I read it, I was puzzled before, but when I read it, when I read that inquiry, I came out even more puzzled as to that. I am saying that unsolved mystery that did take place in Dominica 60 something years ago. And today we are still wanting, factual answers as to really what happened. In the twinkling of an eye, 3 young men in the prime of their lives were cut down. And 60 years, as I said, we really don't know as a people, really and truly, what transpired. Anything, Artie, anything, Gregory, you guys remembered about that day in particular or leading up to that day?
Well, let me tell you what the report actually says by not saying what it should have said. The report that it is the result of some deliberate actions by a person or persons. So that is the first thing. But that is the main item, main conclusion of the report that we have not known for 60
could you please
years.
just repeat?
Because that should signal the need for, okay, you had a commission.
Could you just repeat your first sentence that you said
Yes.
about the report? We did not hear you properly. The internet was giving some issues. Yes.
Okay. To me, one of the most important conclusions of that report is that the incident of the fire was not an accident, but was in fact the result of deliberate actions taken by a person or persons to cause damage and injury to other persons. I say that that is the most important conclusion of the commission of inquiry, because that would have been enough and should have been enough to cause the launching of a full investigation, a full criminal investigation. Because if it wasn't an accident, which Justice St. Bernard concluded, then it was the result of a deliberate act of violence against somebody or bodies. And that made it ripe for police investigation. There should have been a special, dedicated investigation, which still 60 years later has not been done, but needs to be done, because the answers to that incident will inform the way we proceed, because the failure to answer that question, if it wasn't an accident, who caused it? Who was responsible and why? The failure to answer that question has misshaped and distorted Dominican society since then, because we've developed the capacity for shoving things under the carpet so well. If it's uncomfortable, put it aside. And it's interesting, there's a calypso this year on the 60th anniversary of the fire. Pat Aaron pens a song for the dice. He said, things happen in a village, in a society, in a community that everybody knows, everybody sees, but nobody reports, nobody talks, nobody takes it on. That 60 years later, a song like that can be penned, suggests to me that we have so deformed ourselves by not attending to that incident 60 years ago, that it has almost become our culture that we see things happen, but if they are uncomfortable for us or for people who we favor, we just ignore it. We sweep it under the carpet. So the first lesson from this incident is that we must investigate matters that are not accidents. We even investigate accidents, like traffic accidents. Well, but here is an incident that the Commission of Inquiry determined it was not an accident, which means it was the deliberate cause of somebody's actions, and we have not investigated it. That has distorted our behavior for 60 years. That's one. Number two, the Commission also hints at what they believe are the contributing causes to that incident, not an accident. For example, there were 3 young men who for a few years played mass together as sensei. They used the rope sensei. 2 of these young men were musicians. One was a returned Dominican who had distinguished himself in mechanical engineering in England and came back to Dominica and invested in and opened up a modern garage to service cars, vehicles, trucks, etc. And got a new agency for a line of cars called Vauxhall. And that gentleman was so innovative in his approach to caring for people's vehicles. One of his innovations was anybody who he employed, he trained them. He trained them according to high-level mechanical engineering skills. So it wasn't just somebody to hand a tool or to move the oil or to park the car. The people who worked with him became master mechanics. Many of them later migrated and were at the top of their field in New York, in Boston, in Miami, in wherever they went as a result of that training. So that is who that guy was. He was a master marketing agent. That was the first garage that when you brought your car in for servicing, if it was going to take more than a day, you were given a car to drive. That was the first garage you would go to. When you entered, the first thing they did was offer you a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, or something. In other words, the whole service approach that the customer needed to be treated right and well started drawing business away from the other major motor car dealers and garages in Dominica at the time, to the point where it affected their sales. The other major vehicles at that time were Bedford, the Bedford trucks, for example, and Shillingford's was the main agent for that vehicle. Another major was the Ford vehicles, and the Acme Garage was the major agent for that. There was Hillman and Austin and other cars. HHV Whitchurches used to be the agents marketing and selling and those cars and so on. So business started being drawn away from these stalwarts of the car dealership industry. And Mr. Justice St. Bernard, in his commission report, doesn't conclude, but suggests that this loss of business, which began to impact the economic welfare of these companies, was a matter of concern. And that the activities around the days and weeks leading up to February 25th, 1963, when the fire occurred, all seem to suggest that there had been some engagements. some organizing of, you know, people to take care of. And it was felt that the person who needed taking care of was the gentleman, the young man who had started that innovative approach to car dealership, car maintenance, and management. His name was Eric Shillingford.
All right, I think just to interject there one little bit, I will ask Mr. Rabes, who is still here for us, to speak to the type of material that these costumes were made of, how they were made, especially as it relates to their how you call it, the way in which they could ignite or could get flammable very, very quickly. So Mr. Roberts will speak to that in just a while. He mentioned some aspects a while ago in his previous contribution. But I think in preparation for today's program, the road that you're going down, and I want to be very straight with you. There are persons out there who are of a different mindset. They are saying that was not the case. That could not be the case. And they too, they are pointing and giving reasons why, just why they are not in sync, even up to today, as to the view that you are pointing to now as it relates to what exactly may have happened on that day.
Well, that is why there's the need for an investigation. There's the need to get to the bottom of it. In every story, there's your side, there's my side, and there's actually what happened.
Yeah.
And if we are not mature enough, courageous enough to expose ourselves to what might be an inconvenient truth, then we do not grow as a society. I fully understand. In fact, the issues involved here have to do with persons who were very, very, very good friends of the families of the young men who suffered in that fire, and who remained good friends of the families. The children grew up. I was 17 years old when that incident occurred.
Okay.
And I grew up with some of the children of the families who may be implicated in what I am suggesting. But the point is, because there was never any definitive investigation and resolution, we are all left wondering. We are all left in a state of limbo, in so-called emotional purgatory. True. For 60 years. You know what that must mean to the parents and family of all sides in this incident, not to have had definitive. You know what that must mean? To be walking with, playing football with, playing music with, going to school with persons who are your friends, your lifelong friends. And you want the truth and they want the truth, but for some reason, the society is unwilling to invest. So people do what Dominicans have become experts at. They gossip. They drop comments that suggest this, but not definitively. They are afraid of engaging hard facts, difficult facts. We are not going to make any progress and go to school and learn well. So you'll actually have a life. Part of their learning is to have a curious mind and the skills and techniques to investigate, whether it be in the chemistry lab, the physics lab, the botany lab, the English lab, to investigate matters so you understand why things work the way they do. So my suggestion is, notwithstanding, and I know that there are always going to be many sides to any story, especially when people are deeply, closely, personally involved, potentially or actually. But that is not a reason for us not to investigate.
True, true.
That is not a reason for us not to inquire, so that in fact people can finally get to a point where they say, this happened 60 years ago. You personally were not involved or engaged, but your cousin was, or your friend was. And so we forgive. We forgive. We will not forget, because we should never forget. But we can forgive and move on. But if you do not get the facts, Lofty, you will neither forget nor be able to forgive.
True. I agree with you. I agree with you on
Let
that.
let me
just quote as I bring in here my brother Gregory Rabes here on that. It on page number 3 of that report, and brother Rabes, it says here, the fire brigade was on the scene very shortly after the fire started, but by then the men were badly injured. And a very critical point here, it says here, the fire having lasted not more than 30 seconds. All what we're talking about there tonight, Ati, that report says that fire, that famous or infamous fire, only lasted not more than 30 seconds. That struck me when I read that report. Brother Rabes, can you speak to the volatile nature of the sensi, the dress that these men were wearing on that day? You spoke to some of it.
Yeah. Let me just say 30 seconds in the context of fire is a long time. It's 30 seconds. Why? That's a long time. Secondly, before I do that, I wanted to, I know Afi said he was 17 years old. Then I was younger than that. But I seem to recall that they had some sort of a star witness, a woman. I don't have, is it Camilla or something like that? No, that was maybe the Desmond Trotter situation. I'm not quite sure. But I seem to recall that there was a witness.
There's a woman named Ina Joseph.
Something like that.
Ina Joseph.
And I'm not sure what, because if you know all those things, if all those investigations, you really need hard evidence. The thing is, did the investigation, I don't know what the inquiry, did it reach a dead end that it couldn't be pursued criminally because you did not have, well, the witness situation wasn't, it didn't, you couldn't, with the information available, it couldn't get into the criminal domain. I feel you have any thoughts on that?
Now, the commission
that would be an important part in the recommendation that Afi is suggesting.
A commission of inquiry is not an investigation, a criminal investigation.
No, I was asking, I was posing the question at the time in 1963, 1964, when they were doing the immediate post tragedy situation. Was there, I remember there was this woman, as you said, Judy. But at the time, Afi, did it mean that there was a sort of a dead end in the collection of evidence, that's why it could not go further? That's what I'm posing.
I believe that there were several persons like Ina who, by their utterances, seemed to have information about whatever planning might have gone into the incident. Ina and others disappeared. She migrated and never ever came back to Dominica. And other persons, some of whom are still here and are still alive, were never made a part of an investigative process. What a society does when there is a commission of inquiry, the only reason that the commission of inquiry was set up is because it was felt by the society that this thing, we need to understand what happened here. Was this an accident? Was this a deliberate act, a criminal act? And if so, if it was a criminal act, then it should have been handed over to the relevant offices of investigation, the director of prosecutions, the police, the criminal investigation department of the police or a special investigator could have been established, etc., etc. But none of that was done. So it wasn't that it reached a dead end. It says that it never really got going beyond the Commission of Inquiry. The St. Bernard Commission and the report on the commission was actually, it provided a convenient kind of moment of exhale, because people said, okay, well, we've inquired into it. But that report, you know where I read that report? That report was never made widely available in Dominica. I read it at a place called the Research Institute for the Study of Man in Manhattan, New York, when I went to the United States to go to school. That is where I read that report cover to cover, okay? But it was never made the object or subject of wide discussion, although it did, as Gregory is aware, impact how we played mass, with what costuming, what sort of safeguards needed to have been put in place if there were the possibilities that the way we built our costumes made them, you know, highly susceptible to damage and injury, etc., etc. His use of his suggestion about Velcro, for example, would have been one of the things to come out of an investigation. It wouldn't be just a criminal investigation.
Yeah, okay.
It would have been an investigation that would have said to the society, hey, you've been doing this.
Okay, so Afi, you seem to have been suggesting.
So I'm saying that the society appeared not to be.
We are losing Afi, the reception issues.
Afi, are you still with us?
I'm still here. I'm
We
hearing
lost
you.
you a bit.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Afi is here, Gregory. Afi is here. Gregory, I was just asking you to speak to the volatile
The materials
nature.
themselves.
Yes,
Yes. But just quick to say that we have to remember too, in 1963, there was a socio-political context in Dominica. Dominica was still under colonial rule. In that context, you had the Rosso elite or the business elite sort of dominating the social economic structures of Dominica. So in that context, it seemed to see there was a sort of an internecine struggle going on between, as Afi explained, based on certain business competitions and stuff like that. So you find at the time now, well, the so-called bourgeoisie now, the Rosso elite, it seems that they just all came together. And I remember that the people would be in the judiciary, they would be in the police, everything. And it looks, so what Afi seems to be suggesting, based on what's going on there, they all came together and basically did a massive cover-up of what really went on. But the part about the materials, as I earlier said, the guys, for example, in the rope material, them guys, the sisal, them guys to soak that in petrol, gasoline, to give that a shine, a sheen. Now, that you're looking for trouble. Now, the piping sensei, dry banana leaves, but I catching fire quick. When you're making a buka, right now it's buka time, and carem time. When you're making a buka, boy, any little thing, fire catching, So the materials at the time, the plant-based materials that were used to make the sensei were highly, flammable. They could really just catch quick. And 30 seconds, I said, that's a long time. Another issue they had, I guess, because as I said too, the sensei costumes were very bulky, and the way they attached them, right, to the thing, you couldn't take it off like fast enough. So that is why the recommendations now to use Velcro material and other kinds of ways in the design now, that if for any incident, you can just send that off your body. So that would be one of the very important lessons to coming out of the fire. ensure that these costumes have some sort of protection against fire, and the technology is available for that. You can spray those things with what they call this thing, and just make those costumes a little bit more safe for the general population. So that would be a very critical lesson coming out of the fire. I mean, the other lessons that we hinted, I mean, there's cultural or the cultural lessons, and as I indicated earlier, the value that our society puts on our cultural traditions, especially those coming out from Africa and those coming out of our indigenous peoples. So you find the way to go now, and to convince governments, because governments, they don't basically they don't like to get into the business of subventions. Okay, but what can make the case now is to prove or demonstrate to the governments that there's money to be made in the Sensei, there's money to be made in the other carnival traditions, and they can create employment and so on. That is where our data collection, statistics comes in. I mean, people like Dr. Keith Nurse out of Barbados or Trinidad, they have done extensive work on Caribbean festivals. And these guys have documented evidence of the economic value of the cultural industries, the festivals, the entertainment industries. So there's money to be made. So we have to basically document those things and convince the governments or the funders, quote unquote, the business people to put more money into Carnival.
Sure. I think on page 8 of that report, right? It says here, and I just want to read just to strengthen the point. Yes. That you were making earlier. It says here, and that is Mr. St. Bernard making that case. He says, I have not ruled out the possibility or even probability of an accidental fire, but in my opinion, until some explanation could be given which reasonable accounts for the quote-unquote black spots other than the 3 deceased were injured by radiated heat, the evidence leans more on the side of a design than an accident. It continues, I do not know the true explanation, but if the only explanation for the streak of flame is that there were vapors in the atmosphere caused by some volatile substance, then I would rule out accident completely. That is what the person in charge of the inquiry said then, basically supporting the point that you made before.
Yeah, because one of the things that was confusing then and still is now, while Gregory is right that there are some makers of the rope costume that took to using petrol to cleanse and to shine and so forth. I happen to know that those 3 young men didn't use petrol. I happen to know that there's some evidence in that regard, but again, it needs to be brought out. But here's the more important point. If you talk to people like Rupert Lance, Rosemary, and young Vivian Webb, etc., all of whom suffered severe injury, burns, as a result of the incident, they will tell you that their skins were burnt, but their clothing never caught fire. And that is what St. Bernard is referring to. He's saying that because their skins were burnt as if they were on fire, but their clothing covering their skins was never even scorched. People's feet were burned, but their socks were not burned. And so that seemed to suggest what St. Bernard is suggesting, that there the introduction into the atmosphere around that area of some volatile material that actually behaved like flame, maybe accelerated flame, but behaved as if it was a flame, but was really not a flame, but succeeded in causing this terrible deformation of the survivors of that fire. And so that is one of the reasons why there needs to be what we would call today a forensic investigation. Because, you know, what is it would have caused people to be burned on skin while their clothes remained intact? What is it would have caused people to report seeing flames on the ground or fire on the ground where there was no flammable fuel like clothing or cloth or other thing to keep the fire going? So it just, you know, that's what Saint Bernard said. He said there is enough information gathered by his commission to suggest that this thing requires a more, you know, if you will, clinical forensic investigation to find out what is it? How did this happen? Was there the introduction of a flammable material over and above the question of maybe somebody striking a match? If there had been a match struck, would other people's clothing and other garment material not have been scorched and burned and destroyed pretty much as the costumes were? So I reflect on these things, and like you having read his report over again, realize that, but why didn't we just get some answers? Why have you left? Why have we as a people, as a society, left families, the George James family, the Martin family, the Shillingford family? Why have we left those people? The Rupert Lance family, the Webb family. Why have we left those people in this state of in-betweenity for 60 years? Quite apart from the cultural and economic potential benefits of the costumes, etc., why have we not attended to the single most critical element of culture, which is the mind, the emotions, the feelings of the people of the society? And so we've become masters. You see what Gregory was hinting at how a certain class of people could get together and conceal things, keep it away from the public. We have become very, very good at that. Even when the children of the working class later on seized political power and became government up until today, they have become masters at concealing things, at keeping things away from the public. So in other words, is this part of the legacy of 1963? That even working people have become masters of the art of deception and concealment? So you know, I mean, these are questions. When people like myself raise these questions, people find we troublesome. People find we digging up, we chugoning. Well, that is why you sent a whole 2 generations of Dominicans to university. That is why you sent us to school.
Yeah, Ati, let me ask you a question there, Ati. You said previously you were just about 17 years old at the time. Were you actually on site the day to witness any of these things unfolding in real time?
I was playing steel band in the band, the Vauxhall Harmonicats.
Okay.
It was the Harmonicats. It was a group of us who were in school in the academy, and then we were joined later on by other friends of ours who were in school elsewhere, the convent, the grammar school, and then other, you know, persons. And we had this band. And you heard the name, the Vauxhall Harmonicats, because the sponsor of that steel band was the business of Mr. Eric Shillingford. And we were playing steel band coming down King George V Street. We were playing, we had been hired by the Thunderbirds group, which had put on a band that year, you know, celebrating Mexico. And they were dressed in Mexican costumes and so forth. South of the Border was a song we played for them, Down Mexico Way and other songs of the day, etc. Yes, I was right in the band playing.
Okay.
And those three young men were playing mass behind that steel band.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And we all heard the sound. In fact, just the last week I was with Colin Bully, who was also a member of that band. And we heard a song. That's all we heard. That's all we heard. And then we saw people scattering and running. We thought there was a fight because, you know, in those days we had fights. But it wasn't a fight, Lofty. It was not a fight. And it took us a while, maybe just about 5 or 6 seconds, before we understood what had happened, because we were right across, we were in the street and right across from Sims's today. That is where the band had reached. That is where the steel band part of the band was. And the three guys were just behind us. And then I knew personally what had happened when I saw somebody on fire under what used to be the ABC shop across the street from Sims's. I understand some Chinese have bought that building. And I saw somebody up against the wall there. It was obviously a human being, and the costume was burning, and the flames by that time were shooting up high. And the person who I had not identified up until then was holding on to one of the metal supports for the veranda that is still in place today. In fact, I walked right past it on Wednesday this past week. He was holding on to that and screaming. That's when I realized what really had happened is somebody was on fire and they were dying. They were screaming. And I had no idea who it was, Lofty, but I was not more than about 10 or 15 feet away because I was in the middle of the road. The road was about 15 feet wide. I was halfway. So I was 7 feet, and then the sidewalk was another 8 or 10 feet. That's how far I was away from that person. And people were running in all directions away from. And then I looked and I recognized the person burning alive. That was my brother.
Wow.
I recognized him and I started running towards him. I was starting to get out of, we had a mobile stand with the pans, and I was jumping over the stand to go to him because I recognized him. And then 100, maybe 1,000 hands held me back. Just as I was stepping over the gutter to go on the sidewalk, they pulled me back.
Wow. That's
very painful.
Very painful. Yeah.
And they held me back while I watched my brother burn alive, Loftus.
Wow.
I watched my brother burn alive right there on the street of Roseau.
What you hinted to earlier in terms of a serious, sophisticated, I am saying, cover-up went on. Some persons are of that view as well. Let me just read, Afi, just to jog back your memory of this Ina Joseph lady. She, as Rabbi said, was one of the main witnesses who testified or who came forth and brought some information. It says here in that inquiry, Ina Joseph, a young woman who was in the band and near the deceased men, related as follows. She says here, I heard a noise at my back. When I looked back, I saw Eddie on fire. I screamed, help, help. A hand came to my throat from the back and started to strangle me, holding my throat tightly. I turned and saw a tall fellow with a long painted straw hat. He had a large belt from across the shoulder, and on the other side of his face was painted black. He had on a dark blue jeans and about 6 feet tall he was. I fell to the ground. I got again and saw Eddie had a fire on his neck. I said, somebody help the boy. I tried to untie the rope. The same fellow came and cuffed me on my right side, and I fell to the ground. I don't remember anything again until I felt a prick in my arm, and that it was an injection. That is what Ina said on the day. It continues by saying in the report, on the whole, though I find Ina Joseph to be a very unreliable witness, there is some support for her story that when she attempted to help Martin, someone struck her, as James Daway, who was standing on the sidewalk, said to her, you all should not do that. I will say who. And he saw a man hold her and cuff her in the face, and she fell on the sidewalk. Then she was taken to Idolins Johnson's home. He also stated that the man's face was painted in black on both sides. Several persons identified to the fact that Ina Joseph at the time, the men caught on fire, and she shouted, it was Bobby. I know who. I will tell. And Emmanuel Greenaway, who was at Idolins Johnson's home when Ina was brought there, said that George James, deceased, asked her who set the fire, and she replied, I will tell you. I will tell you, but she did not. I think that story, that situation that happened, it basically just keep intriguing me every time I read about the accounts, not just of Ina, but a number of persons who came forth with information. And it seems as if, though, as you said before, thousands of persons were there, reveling, having a good time. That situation occurred, 3 men dead, a number of persons got scotched in that situation. And for some reason, the facts of the matter just could not come to bear. It's like everybody that spoke, basically at the end of their discussion with Mr. St. Bernard and that commission, then it just fell to a dead end. Very, very mysterious indeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really the tragic part of the story, the investigation part. Even if you investigate and you found none of the witnesses were reliable or could be dependent, at least you would have found something. But because he kept finding out, Mr. St. Bernard kept discovering in his inquiry, there was collaboration. There was more than one person. There were several persons. You know, there were other people who were taking pictures. He said, but his mandate wasn't to go into it to the point of eventually ending up with who did what. His mandate was to say, did something happen here that warrants an investigation? That was after inquiry. Now you would have an investigation. We never got to that stage. So a lot of people have died and gone and left, but there's still some of us alive who were there and who have had to live with that tragic uncertainty for 60 years. And I've watched, like I said, persons who have tried to tell me, man, Afi, forget that, man. Leave that alone, man. Put that behind you. Put that behind me? How do I put my soul behind me? How does somebody put a memory like that behind them? You don't. You can't. You're not expected to. And so we end up here, 2023, still not knowing for sure what happened, still speculating. And so I draw the lessons from it. I try to draw lessons out of this that are not just personal, but as you can well imagine, it is very difficult, Lofty, not to be personal.
Yeah.
Especially when I was the only member of my family on site. My sister was there, but she and her friends managed to run away, escape, from as did thousands of other Dominicans. So I just want to say to whoever is listening to this, if you are in torment about something for as long as I have been about this, what would you do? What would you do? What is your advice? How does one put aside something that you experience in real time, in live and in color? How do you put that aside when in fact the questions keep lingering? And there are still people around who, like me, were on site. There were lots of people who were there, who, like Ina, saw things and heard things, and maybe even like Ina had some idea as to what or who. How is it possible to maintain a silence? And that's why Pat's song for Dice this year is so, for me, it's so poignant, because it says people in Dominica appear to have learned how to see some horrible things occur and to say nothing about it, and to experience a sound of silence. The young girl in the Warner area, the other people who saw what was beginning to happen before somebody exploded in passion and destroyed another human life, etc. Why do we remain silent in the face of the abuse of women, the abuse of children, the abuse of the environment, the abuse of culture? Why do we remain silent? Gregory spoke about the potential for culture as an economic pillar of the society. I mean, Gregory knows I am fully in sync with that. But then Gregory says, oh, we have to convince the government. Who or what is the government? The government is us. For decades, I have also tried to convince the government and others that the environment, our rivers, our trees, our bird life, our fish life, is key to our success as a tourism country. Even something as tangible as that. It is not an intangible like culture and art and music and dance. Something as tangible. We have not been able to convince the people in authority that we should be protecting our rivers, protecting our forests, protecting our lands, protecting our birds, No! For them, it is just another item to be utilized. And that is what is happening. So I say to Gregory, culture and the environment are on the same page. That is why UNESCO established the World Heritage Center to bring that to the attention of the world, that there is intangible and tangible culture, both of which must be protected, both of which are vital to the economic and spiritual well-being of humanity. But sadly, while we have developed a culture of silence, we have developed a culture of ignoring the obvious. The obvious, as Gregory has been working almost all his cultural life to convince people that music, art, dance, and song, and so on, is very important to economics and to livelihood.
Yeah.
And we, on the other side, trying to convince the same authorities that rivers are not places you dump garbage or sewage into.
I think as we're about to bring the program to a wrap in just a while, I want to take at least 2 or 3 comments from the live feed. But there is another passage that I just want to read in wrapping up, because whatever happened on that day, Arthi, to me, based on me just reading that report, there has to be, or had to be rather, some level of sophistication that went on into the cause of that fire, which caused 3 men dead and others to be scorched. What I just want to put here before we leave here tonight is that in the report, it says here, Mr. St. Bernard is writing here, perhaps I should mention the evidence of Stella Green, who reported that she kissed Judge James. And remember, people, Judge James is one of the brothers who died on Carnival Monday evening when she was in the hospital. And by the next morning, let me take that again. Perhaps I should mention the evidence of Stella Green, who reported that she kissed Judge James on Carnival Monday evening when he was in the hospital. And by the next morning, there were blisters on her lips. She again kissed him the day before he died, which was about 9 days after his injury. And on this occasion, her lips were again blistered. The doctors who testified have indicated that the first blistering could have been caused by some chemical substance on the body of James, but could not satisfactorily explain the second blistering. In their view, this could not have been caused by chemicals. I think
very sophisticated there, man.
I don't know. Every time I read passages of that inquiry, it just opens up more cans of worms, as it were, as you were alluding to. A proper forensic investigation should have gone on into that situation already.
And it is still possible, Lofty, because as you know, forensic science has advanced so much that, cases have been reopened that have been closed for 50, 60 years. Bodies exhumed, etc., and investigations conducted using the best available modern forensic science and resolving issues that were left unresolved for decades. So, I mean, to many other people, this may not be important, but I would maybe suggest, like you have done, they should read the report. They should read the commission report. More questions than provides answers. And what then should a maturing society do about it? If we don't, I think we're going to run the risk of people like Gregory, people like myself, people like my brother, people like George James. Remember, George James was a musician, like my brother Eddie.
Yeah.
George James has a son who was born after he died. That is George James. George Jr., who is Stella. So let's be clear that there are families and there are human beings and sensibilities involved. And we're talking culture, as Gregory was. You have 2 master musicians.
True.
had their lives snuffed out. Eddie was it. And so let's be clear that this doesn't just cut deep at the level of family, it cuts deep into the culture. Eddie was a master musician. George was a master musician. And that very year, 1963, George was the musician who came with his clarinet and taught Vauxhall, the steel band that we were playing in. He taught us that song, The Voices of Spring, a classical waltz. He came night after night after night until we got it.
Mm-hmm.
So look at the connections. George, the musician who taught the steel band that I am playing in, a song that we went to the proram competition with. My brother Eddie, I mean, Eric, the sponsor of the same steel band that we are playing in. I mean, how much more connected do we need to get in here? Is this coincidence? What is it? At least let's get some answers.
Sure.
Let's get some answers.
Afi, 2 or 3 comments from the live feed, and we must bring this as at least discussion to a wrap for now. I mean to say it is still an open case that is not solved. So we for sure will continue to seek answers. Avril Bertrand, is writing here. So painful. Love you always, Athi. Marceline Edwards is writing, or is asking that all important question, or is making that statement rather. How can anyone witness the fiery death through screams and agony of the brother and not agonize over it? That's the question she's asking, and ends by saying, something so tragic and traumatizing cannot be forgotten. Gail Rui is writing here, the witnesses must have been threatened with death threats if they spoke. Take consolation in the fact that the perpetrators have not escaped since they experienced hell enough before they passed, and they are now burning in hell. These are just 3 comments, Afi, that I want to punch here at us. And, we will for sure continue on that conversation. I spoke to brother Gabriel Christian this morning. As a matter of fact, there's a book about that fire on Amazon. So persons out there who want to read more about that situation through the writings of Brother Gabe, who I believe, and also Dr. Irvin Andre, you can collect your copy on Amazon as well. There's the inquiry which I have in my possession. I can send it to you guys via an e-copy, and I will try my very best for Civic Vibes to take that copy that is in text, that is in print now, and have it in audio form, so persons can, in the comfort of their home, in the comfort of your time and space, just listen to that report, so that you could get a better understanding, a better feel as to what really went on during the carnival celebrations in 1963, 60 years on, and we are still without answers for the grieving family, Athi and others. So, gentlemen, Mr. Rabes, I know you took some time off, so thank you very much. Afi, you're always a very patriotic brother on the front line. You guys' final comments. Gregory, you take first.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of my specialization on the program, in terms of the sensei, I would just want to urge all the stakeholders, actually, because, we're talking about the bands themselves, the Lapo Cabaret bands, the designers, fashion designers. Let us revisit, the potential of sensei as a cultural industry. There's also very strong potential of the sensei in regular fashion. Matter of fact, I've seen some sort of, I call them pseudo sensei skirts and blouses, actually. In fact, I met an African woman in London with just regular trousers using the same sensei concept. So there is a lot of potential in the sensei in terms of, it has synergies, in terms of the music, the costumery, the fashion, the design, and not just for the carnival period, but for regular fashion and stuff like that. And, the question of the bands themselves, organizing the choreography, and, the question of the professionalizing, if I may use that term, their whole operations, their management, their rehearsals, their routine, their repertoire, their management, and going out there to the Caribbean and take Sensei to the world, man. Thank you. Merci au fil, merci au shine.
All right, brother. Merci. Thank you very much, Brother Rabes, for coming on. Thank you. Much appreciated on behalf of the listeners and viewers. Athi, your final thoughts, my brother. I know that will not be your final words on that topic, but your final thoughts for now, bro.
Well, first of all, let me, to her credit, Ivona John Baptist of DBS Radio has invited us to be her guest on a program on Saturday morning, coming.
Okay.
9:30. So people can join us. There'll be several of the survivors of the fire are going to be on live with her. Some of the persons who were burned. So we'll be there from 9:30 on Saturday morning live. It'll be streamed as well. So I'm glad people are getting comfortable enough and brave enough, like you, to sort of inquire into this matter. And kudos to you, kudos to Ivona and a few others. As far as my thoughts for now, you go through life and things happen that are not nice, that are not good. You even do things yourself that maybe are not nice and not good. But we really have to dig deep to find the guts, the courage, the faith to turn that grief into a fuel for good. And that's what I've spent my life doing. People often ask me, Afi, why do you continue? You've done so much. Why don't you stop? Why are you doing it? Why are you walking? Why are you talking? Why? Well, that's why. That's part of the explanation. Part of the explanation is there's an unanswered part of my being. Other people avoid going through life with unanswered questions. And the source of my strength for doing that, really, apart from family and friends, is really, the Almighty. It's finding that, there's that big, powerful source of power, source of guidance, source of inspiration that we call God, but we don't pay attention to. In fact, we spend so much time taking God out of our lives and then wonder why we are experiencing such bad times. So I have found a path to putting God back into life, my life, and into everything I do. No, it's not me doing it. If the Lord wants me to stop, he will stop me. Nobody else can stop me. No gun, no bullet, no politics, no nothing. It is only the Almighty, the Holy Spirit, that can stop me. And so I take courage from that. I'm fearless. Death holds no fear for me. I've been close to death in many, many ways. The closest I've got to it is watching my brother burn alive. So I know what death is about. I know what hell must be like, which is why I'm not going there. And so I thank you, Lofty, because if there's one person out there who can, from our conversation this evening, find a path to dealing with their demons, dealing with their grief, dealing with parts of their lives that have been painful for decades, then with you, a part of making that possible, that they can now rise above that. And then as long as you have life, it means that the Lord has things for you to do. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. Do not be distracted. Do not abuse silence. Silence is for reflection and prayer. Silence is not for deception. So let us put silence aside and let us make a nice, joyful sound and let us find again our way, our life, our path, our purpose. And let's not be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. God is on your side. Spirit is with you. You understand how you get there. It's a beautiful feeling. It is that beautiful feeling that allows me to manage the grief of that moment. And this year in particular, the 60th anniversary, it's just cutting deeper this year. It's just cutting deeper this year. And I know I'll call myself these moments of, pain and grief and suffer, because I know beyond that are moments of joy and happiness, and I look forward to that. And I thank you for being part of that process, Lofty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Afi. Do enjoy the rest of the evening, you and Brother Robert. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ayahoro.
There's a place for people like you. If you stand up for those down on their knees and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, if you shine a little light, give sight to the ones who've lost their way, there's a place for people like you. I've heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place up there for people like you.
Dominica.
If you walk around with your
Dominicans. I'm just there, trying to process what Afi said a while ago.
if you lay down your life,
That very dreadful sight of seeing his brother burnt to death.
for people like
And the two other young men on that very dreadful day.
there, the streets are made of gold.
More questions and answers?
There's a hand to hold.
We must continue. We must continue.
When your days down here are through,
We must continue to seek the truth, and not necessarily the truth, but the facts of the matter. Or the matters, rather, that have plagued us in Dominica for so long. Could it be, just could it be, that all-important question? Where our country is at today is as a result of these unexplained
there the streets are made of,
and unanswered situations that gone before.
and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, yeah.
Many persons are hurting in Dominica this time.
For people like you.
You just heard it through the voice of Brother Atherton Mate. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you are one out there, you are hurting
Oh, yeah.
from the Civic Vibes team, we want to encourage you to keep holding on. Trust in the good Lord above,
To fix more than your break.
that one day, someday,
If you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain.
your tears will be no more.
For people like you.
Dominicans, thank you very, very much indeed. Those of you who have been riveted to your seats, or to your seat rather, and listening to an encounter from Athi Mate on a very tragic situation that transpired in Dominica 60 years on.
Who've lost their way, there's a place for people like you.
I term it an unsolved mystery.
Up there, the streets are made of gold, and when you get there,
thousands of eyes were there in that day.
I believe when your days down here are through.
And in terms of the reporting or the accounting of that tragic situation,
If you walk around,
just cannot be pieced together just yet to bring some consolation to the grieving families. Athi, you and others, hold on, my brother. Someday the facts will be told.
your life for love so someone could be.
So on behalf of the Civic teams, see you next week at the same time, same place from 6 o'clock for yet another interesting Civic Vibes program.
The streets are made of gold.
I'm monitoring a situation that is unfolding in Portsmouth as we speak, where 12 men, it is reported, have been in the cells in the Portsmouth police cells from Friday.
Down here through, there's a place.
So my work still continues. I'm going to monitor this situation and give you guys any update as it relates to that situation, where 12 men have been arrested from Friday. And that charge of illegal entering Dominica are being contemplated on them as we speak. Let me see if I can get some updates, and I will bring you guys once the updates become available. So Dominicans, thank you very, very much indeed. Yours truly, Loftus Durand. I'm signing out. Bye-bye. I love you.
And when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, yeah, there's a place up there for people like you. I know you're out there, so keep doing what you do, 'cause there's a place up there for people like you.